The fluorescent lights in the Whitmore Technologies boardroom cast sharp shadows across 11 faces, each one wearing an expression somewhere between confusion and fear. Elijah Carver stood at the head of the mahogany table, his fingers resting on a stack of papers so thick it resembled a small-town phone book. 184 pages. 6 months of work compressed into evidence that would either destroy careers or vanish into corporate oblivion, depending on how the next 13 minutes unfolded. His suit didn't fit quite right, borrowed from Marcus down the hall, a neighbor who'd believed him when he said he had an important meeting. The fabric pulled slightly at the shoulders and the pants broke a half-inch too high above his shoes. But the briefcase was his own, purchased 3 days ago, with money scraped from what little remained after paying for Zora's braces. It was meant to look professional, to command the kind of respect a maintenance worker in a company jumpsuit never received. Derek Hollis sat 3 chairs down, his face the color of old newspaper. The IT director's fingers drummed against the table in a rhythm that betrayed panic beneath practiced calm. George Pemberton, silver-haired and 62 years of wearing power like a second skin, kept his eyes fixed on the window, as if the Chicago skyline might offer an escape route his mind couldn't conjure. Samuel Crane hadn't moved since Elijah entered, frozen in the posture of a man watching his past and future collide. "You asked who I am." Elijah's voice came out steady, each word measured like ingredients in a recipe that couldn't afford mistakes. "I'm Elijah Carver, the night maintenance worker you've seen mopping your floors for the past 6 months. The man who fixes your lights when they flicker, who empties your trash bins, who exists in your peripheral vision, but never quite registers as human." Derek's hand stopped drumming. "I'm also the father of an 8-year-old girl who asked me 2 weeks ago why people at her school treat her differently because of the color of her skin. I'm the husband of a woman who died 4 years ago on her way home from a double shift, too exhausted to notice the red light she ran. And I'm the person who spent 183 nights documenting every single instance of systematic racial discrimination this company has perpetrated over the past 6 years." He opened the briefcase. The click of the latches sounded like a gunshot in the silence. 73 people, 73 families, all of them gone because someone in this room decided that talent, dedication, and excellence matter less than the color of skin. Catherine Whitmore sat at the far end of the table, her face pale but composed. She'd known this moment was coming. They'd rehearsed it twice in her office, going over the sequence of revelations, the order of evidence. But knowing and experiencing were different countries, and Elijah could see her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the arms of her chair. Derek finally found his voice. "What is this? Some kind of shakedown? You were fired for cause, Carver. Accessing systems without authorization." The door opened. 2 FBI agents stepped inside their presence, transforming the room from corporate theater into something with actual consequences. Special Agent Lucas Thorne gave Elijah a slight nod, then took up position against the wall. His partner, a woman whose badge read Martinez, did the same on the opposite side. "No one's leaving until we're finished." Elijah's words carried a weight he'd never known he possessed. 6 months ago, standing in this building felt like trespassing. Now, with evidence and truth as his foundation, the marble floors and executive privilege meant nothing. Let me take you back, 6 months back, to be precise. To the night that changed everything, though I didn't know it then. The maintenance job posting appeared on a Tuesday evening, sandwiched between ads for warehouse workers and delivery drivers. Whitmore Technologies needed a night shift electrician. $22 an hour, benefits after 90 days, and the kind of stability Elijah hadn't tasted since before Naomi died. Zora sat at their kitchen table, gap between her front teeth visible even as she frowned over her math homework. The apartment was small, $800 a month, in a building where the heat worked 3 days out of 7, but it was theirs. The walls held photos of better times, Naomi laughing at their wedding, Zora as a newborn, the 3 of them at Navy Pier before cancer treatments and medical bills rewrote their story. "Ba, why do you have to work at night?" Zora's pencil hovered over a fraction problem she'd solved correctly but didn't trust. "Because nighttime pays better, sweetheart. And because your braces cost $4,500 that our insurance doesn't cover." She looked up, then brown eyes so much like her mother's that sometimes Elijah had to look away. "I don't need braces. Your teeth say otherwise. Besides, I'll still be here in the afternoons. We can do homework together, make dinner, all of that. I'll just sleep while you're at school." The lie tasted bitter. He'd be exhausted running on 5 hours of sleep, aging faster than any 42-year-old should. But the math was simple. $762 in savings wouldn't carry them through next month's rent, let alone the dental work, the upcoming car registration, the winter coats Zora was rapidly outgrowing. He applied that night. The online form wanted education history, and he listed the 2 years of community college he'd completed before Naomi got pregnant. Electrical engineering GPA 3.8 until life required different priorities. The form asked for references, and he gave three, two former employers who'd remember him as reliable, one professor who might not remember him at all. The callback came 18 hours later. A woman from HR, voice bright with the kind of professionalism that came from reading scripts. "Mr. Carver, we'd like to schedule an interview. Are you available Thursday at 2? He rearranged his freelance electrical work, a house rewiring job that paid cash but couldn't promise anything beyond next week, and showed up 15 minutes early. The Whitmore building rose 40 stories above Michigan Avenue, all steel and glass, and the subtle brutality of modern architecture. Inside, the lobby gleamed. Marble floors, designer furniture, a reception desk manned by two people whose jobs seemed to be looking simultaneously welcoming and intimidating. The interview lasted 12 minutes. A facilities manager named Patterson asked about voltage tolerances and circuit load calculations, nodding as Elijah answered. "You're overqualified for maintenance work," Patterson observed, pen tapping against his notepad. "I need stable hours and benefits." Elijah kept his voice neutral. "My daughter needs braces, and I need to know I'll have a paycheck every 2 weeks. "Fair enough. When can you start Monday if that works?" "Monday it is. Night shift 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., Sunday through Thursday. You'll report to Fred Walsh for the first week, then you're on your own." "Any questions?" "Just one. What made you call me instead of the other applicants?" Patterson smiled, and there was something tired in it. "You answered the technical questions correctly. Most people who apply for maintenance don't know the difference between a circuit breaker and a fuse box. We need someone who can actually fix things, not just change light bulbs." That first Monday night, Elijah kissed Zora goodbye at 9:30. She was already in pajamas ready for bed, but insisting on staying up until he left. Her gap-toothed smile was the last thing he saw before stepping into the November cold, and he carried it with him through the 40-minute bus ride to downtown Chicago. Fred Walsh was 65, white-haired, and possessed the kind of calm that came from seeing everything twice. He shook Elijah's hand with a grip that had earned its strength through decades of honest work. "Welcome to the night shift. It's quieter than days, which is both good and bad. Good because you can actually think. Bad because when something breaks, you're the only one around to fix it." They walked the building together, Fred pointing out the locations of electrical panels, server rooms, storage closets. The executive floors occupied 12 through 18, mostly empty at night except for the occasional workaholic. Below that, engineering and design teams. Above, more executives' conference rooms, and what Fred called the ivory tower, where the CEO and board members kept offices that cost more to furnish than most people earned in a year. "Kate Whitmore's on 14, Fred mentioned as they rode the elevator up. "Young for a CEO. 29 took over when her father died 3 years back. Smart as they come, but she inherited a mess. Company was bleeding money and talent when she stepped in." "What changed?" "She fired half the board, restructured the whole operation. We're profitable again, but word is not everyone's happy about how she did it." The 14th floor smelled like expensive carpet and the kind of silence that money bought. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city lights stretching to the horizon like a mirror of the stars above. Kate's office sat at the end of the hall. Double doors closed lights off. Fred knocked anyway, a courtesy to empty space. "Always check before you go in anywhere up here. These people value their privacy, and they've got the lawyers to make your life hell if you violate it." Elijah filed that away alongside the other warnings and wisdom Fred dispensed. They finished the tour at 2 a.m., and Fred left him with a radio, a ring of keys, and a piece of advice that would prove prophetic. Trust your gut. Something feels wrong, it probably is. And don't let anyone make you feel small for doing this job. Keeping a building running is honest work, and honest work has dignity. The first week passed without incident. Elijah learned the rhythms of the building, which lights flickered at exactly 1:17 a.m., which bathrooms had plumbing issues that maintenance had given up trying to permanently fix, which executives left their offices unlocked, and which ones installed additional security beyond what the building provided. He saw janitorial staff from Eastern Europe and West Africa, security guards from the South Side, and a rotating cast of IT workers who treated him like furniture that occasionally moved. Derek Hollis appeared on Thursday night of that first week. He strode through the 12th floor with the confidence of someone who owned the space, even though Elijah knew from the building directory that Derek was merely an IT director, several rungs below the executive suite. He was 38, fit in the way of men who had gym memberships and the time to use them. And he looked at Elijah with an expression that registered somewhere between dismissal and disdain. "You're new." Elijah straightened from the electrical panel he'd been inspecting. Started Monday. Elijah Carver. Derek didn't offer his hand. Make sure you clean up after yourself. Last maintenance guy left tools everywhere, made the place look like a construction site. Will do. And stay out of the server rooms unless you're specifically called in. We've got sensitive equipment, can't have people wandering around. Understood. Derek walked away without another word, and Elijah returned to his inspection. The interaction was brief, forgettable, the kind of casual superiority that came naturally to men who'd never questioned their place in hierarchies. But something in Derek's eyes lingered, a sharpness that suggested he cataloged people and filed them under useful or obstacle. The door incident happened on Friday of the second week. Elijah had been searching for the electrical room on the 12th floor, the one that controlled the lighting for the executive suite. The building blueprints were outdated, marking it as room 1247, when in fact the whole floor had been renovated 2 years prior. He'd checked 3 rooms already, finding conference spaces and storage closets before arriving at 1247. He knocked. No answer. Tried the handle. Unlocked. The room was dark, and he fumbled for the light switch, stepping inside before his eyes adjusted. That's when he realized the space was too large, too furnished. This wasn't a mechanical room. This was someone's office, or Elijah. He froze. The voice came from his left, and as his vision adapted to the dim light filtering through half-closed blinds, he saw her. Kate Whitmore stood wrapped in a towel, hair damp from a shower he hadn't heard running. Her gym bag sat on a chair near what he now recognized as a private bathroom attached to what must be her personal suite. His brain stalled, mouth forgetting how language worked. I thought this was the electrical room. I'm so sorry, He backed toward the door, tripping over his own feet in his haste to exit. Kate's face had gone from shock to something harder to read, but Elijah didn't wait to interpret it. He pulled the door shut behind him and practically ran to the elevator, heart hammering against his ribs loud enough that he worried everyone in the building could hear. The ride down to the basement felt like falling. He'd be fired. Obviously. Immediately. No 2-week notice, no severance, just security escorting him out, and Zora asking why he was home early, and how were they going to afford her braces now. In the basement mechanical room, the actual one marked with a faded placard that said authorized personnel only. Elijah leaned against a shelf stacked with cleaning supplies and tried to convince his lungs to function normally. The smell of industrial cleaner and machine oil usually comforted him, a reminder of honest work in a dishonest world. Tonight it just made him nauseous. His phone showed 11:47. In 13 minutes it would be Saturday, and he'd have 2 days to agonize before learning whether he still had a job on Monday. He stayed in the basement until his shift ended at 6, avoiding the upper floors jumping every time his radio crackled with static. Zora was still asleep when he got home. Elijah stood in her doorway watching her breathe and felt the weight of every bad decision that had led them here. 2 years of college abandoned when Naomi got pregnant. A decade of freelance work that paid just enough but promised nothing. Naomi's death leaving him with medical debt that bankruptcy had only partially erased. And now this, the first stable job in years, about to evaporate because he couldn't read a goddamn floor plan correctly. Saturday and Sunday crawled past. He took Zora to the park, helped her with homework, made grilled cheese sandwiches that tasted like ashes in his mouth. She asked if something was wrong, and he smiled and said, work was just tiring, that's all. She accepted this because she was 8 and trusted that adults told the truth. Monday night, Elijah arrived at the building expecting a pink slip. Instead, Fred handed him a radio and a knowing look. Heard you had an interesting Friday. Elijah's stomach dropped. I didn't mean to relax. Fred's smile held sympathy. Ms. Whitmore isn't pressing anything. But maybe knock louder next time. Yeah, she's not going to file a complaint. She's the CEO. If she wanted you gone, you'd be gone. The fact that you're here suggests otherwise. The relief was physical, a loosening in his chest that let him breathe properly for the first time in 60 hours. He worked his shift in a daze, hyper-aware of every sound on the upper floors, ready to disappear if he heard Kate's voice. Tuesday passed. Wednesday. Thursday morning at 5:30, just as his shift was winding down, Derek summoned him to the 9th floor IT department. Elijah's stomach nodded. Pre-dawn meetings never meant good news. The space was open plan, standing desks and monitors displaying more information than any human could process. Derek's office sat in the corner glass walls that let him survey his domain while maintaining the illusion of accessibility. He was already there, coffee in hand, looking fresh despite the hour. Elijah knocked on the frame of the open door. Derek looked up from his laptop and something cold slid across his features before smoothing back into professional neutrality. Carver, come in. Close the door. The click of the door shutting felt ominous. Elijah stood hands clasped in front of him, while Derek leaned back in his chair with the studied casualness of someone about to deliver a prepared speech. I understand you had an incident last Friday. With Ms. Whitmore. It was an accident. I was looking for the electrical room and the floor plan was outdated. I apologized to Ms. Whitmore and I'm sure it was an accident. Derek's tone suggested he believed nothing of the sort. But here's the thing, Carver. We have standards at Whitmore Technologies. Standards of professionalism of behavior, of knowing your place in the organizational structure. I understand, I'm not sure you do. Derek stood moving to the window. His reflection in the glass showed a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Some people, when they're new to an environment, they think they can just wander around, go wherever they please. But access is a privilege, Carver. It's earned through trust, and trust takes time. I wasn't trying to... Let me be clear. Derek turned to face him directly. You're here to maintain electrical systems. That's it. You're not here to explore. You're not here to familiarize yourself with spaces that don't concern you. The executive floors, the server rooms, the research labs, those areas are off limits unless you receive a specific work order. Fred told me to familiarize myself with the building layout. That's what I was doing. Fred's been here 30 years. He's earned certain liberties. You've been here 2 weeks. The distinction should be obvious. The word obvious carried a weight that had nothing to do with tenure and everything to do with the 6 inches of height difference between them, the color of their skin, the unspoken hierarchies that shaped every interaction but could never be named directly. Am I clear, Crystal? Good. Now I've been reviewing your file. 2 years of college electrical engineering. Decent GPA. Why didn't you finish? Personal circumstances. Care to elaborate? Not particularly. Derek's smile sharpened. Family issues can be complicated. I get that. But when those issues affect job performance, they become my concern. You have a daughter, correct? 8 years old. The mention of Zora felt like a hand around Elijah's throat. His face must have shown something, because Derek's smile widened fractionally. Relax, Carver. I'm not threatening your kid. I'm just saying that people with dependents, they need to be extra careful about keeping their jobs. Can't afford mistakes. Can't afford to make waves. You understand what I'm saying? You understand perfectly. Excellent. Then we shouldn't have any more problems. You can go. Elijah left the office with his hands balled into fists, nails digging crescents into his palms. The elevator ride down felt like descending into deep water pressure building in his ears and chest. He'd heard coded language before every black man in America developed fluency by adolescence. But Derek's particular dialect was refined by corporate environments where explicit racism carried consequences, but implicit bias remained consequence-free. That weekend, Elijah wrote a letter, 6 drafts, each one attempting to strike the impossible balance between genuine apology and maintaining dignity. He wasn't sorry for being black, wasn't sorry for existing in spaces that made powerful people uncomfortable. But he was sorry for violating Kate's privacy, for the shock and violation she must have felt. The final version fit on a single page, handwritten because email felt too impersonal, and anything longer suggested he wanted something beyond forgiveness. Ms. Whitmore, I owe you an apology for last Friday evening. My intrusion into your private space was unintentional, but inexcusable. I take full responsibility for not confirming the room's purpose before entering and for the discomfort in violation of privacy my mistake caused. I understand if you wish to pursue disciplinary action. Whatever consequences you deem appropriate, I accept without contest. My only request is that if termination is your decision, please provide 2 weeks' notice so I can arrange alternative employment for my daughter's sake. With sincere apologies, Elijah Carver. He gave the letter to Fred on Monday night, sealed in an envelope marked private. Fred raised an eyebrow but said nothing, disappearing toward the executive floors while Elijah worked through a plumbing issue on 3. An hour later, Fred returned with a sealed envelope that bore Elijah's name in precise handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of Whitmore Technologies letterhead, the message brief enough to memorize, Mr. Carver. Your apology is accepted and appreciated. The incident is closed as far as I'm concerned. However, I would appreciate your expertise on a technical matter. The lighting system in my office suite has been malfunctioning, bulbs burning out within days of replacement, flickering at odd hours. The facilities manager hasn't been able to identify the root cause. If you're available, please assess the system during your Thursday shift. Full access authorization has been granted through security. CW Elijah read it 3 times, searching for subtext or trap. But the words remained stubbornly literal, a CEO asking an electrician to fix her lights. Nothing more, nothing less. Thursday night at 10:30, he took the elevator to 14 with a toolbox that suddenly felt inadequate. Kate's suite was empty when he arrived, but lights were on, and her computer screen glowed with what looked like financial spreadsheets. He knocked on the frame of her open door, even though she wasn't there because Fred's advice about courtesy still echoed. "You can come in, Mr. Carver." He turned. Kate stood behind him dressed in jeans and a sweater that made her look younger than 29. Her hair was pulled back, glasses perched on her nose, and she held a coffee mug that read "World's OKest CEO." "Thank you for coming. The lights have been driving me crazy for weeks. Every bulb we replace dies within 3 days, and the electricians keep saying there's nothing wrong with the wiring." Elijah set his toolbox down and examined the ceiling fixtures. Standard LED bulbs in what should have been a straightforward circuit. But when he tested the voltage, his meter showed fluctuations that explained everything. "You've got a ballast problem. The transformer that regulates power to these fixtures is failing, sending irregular voltage that's killing the bulbs prematurely. It's not the wiring itself, it's the component managing the power flow." "Can you fix it? I can replace the ballast." "Yeah, should take about 40 minutes, please." "And Mr. Carver, you can call me Kate. Ms. Whitmore makes me feel like my grandmother." The work took 37 minutes. Elijah swapped out the failing ballast, tested the new installation, and confirmed stable voltage across all fixtures. Kate watched from her desk, occasionally glancing up from her computer, and when he finished, she walked over to inspect the results. "You're better than our regular electricians. They've been here 4 times and couldn't diagnose the issue. I had good teachers. Community college doesn't get enough credit for quality instruction. You only did 2 years. Had to leave when my girlfriend got pregnant. Needed to work full-time, couldn't afford both tuition and rent." Kate nodded, and something in her expression suggested she understood the calculus of sacrificed dreams better than her CEO title implied. "That's admirable. A lot of people would have walked away from that responsibility." "Walking away wasn't an option. Still isn't. Your daughter, she must be in elementary school now. 3rd grade, 8 years old gap between her front teeth and smarter than I was at twice her age. What's her name? Zora. That's beautiful. Unusual. Her mother chose it. Naomi loved Zora Neale Hurston, wanted our daughter to have a name that meant something beyond just sounding pretty. Loved past tense car accident 4 years ago. Driver ran a red light. I'm so sorry. Thank you. We manage. Zora's resilient. Kids often are. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, just the natural pause of 2 people who'd shared more than they intended. Then Kate gestured to the lights. How much do I owe you for the repair? It's part of my job. No charge. Still, above and beyond the standard maintenance work, you saved us from having electricians up here every week. Then consider us even. You accepted my apology when you could have had me fired. That's worth more than a ballast replacement. Kate smiled, and it transformed her face from Uyo Ice Queen to someone who might be human beneath the armor of authority. Fair enough. But I'm keeping your name on file for future technical issues. The regular contractors clearly don't have your diagnostic skills. Just doing what I was trained for. Most people don't. That's what makes it valuable. Elijah packed his tools and left, riding the elevator down with a sense that something had shifted, though he couldn't identify exactly what. In the basement, organizing his workspace for the next shift's worker, he found himself thinking about Kate's words. Most people don't. It was true in ways that extended far beyond electrical work. Most people didn't show up, didn't follow through, didn't bring their full capabilities to environments that undervalued them. But what happened when you did show up, when you brought everything you had, and the environment still found ways to diminish you? The answer would arrive 2 nights later, when a woman who'd spent 32 years filing papers would open a door to something bigger than either of them had imagined. When invisibility would transform from liability into weapon, and when documentation would become the currency of justice. But tonight, Elijah rode the bus home through streets that looked the same as they had yesterday, unaware that he'd just fixed the lights for someone who would help him illuminate far darker corners of institutional corruption. Unaware that in 72 hours he'd learned that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do in a building designed for silence is to start paying attention. He unlocked his apartment at 6:45 a.m., hung his coat on the hook by the door, and looked in on Zora. She slept with her math homework still on the nightstand, gap-toothed smile visible even in rest. He pulled the blanket higher over her shoulders and whispered something his mother used to say when he was young and the world felt too heavy. We're bigger than the sky, baby girl. Always bigger than the sky. He didn't know yet what those words would come to mean or how many times he'd repeat them in the months ahead. Didn't know that they'd become a mantra for survival, a promise of transcendence, a reminder that some things mattered more than fear. But he would learn. Judith Brennan had worked at Whitmore Technologies for 32 years, which meant she'd outlasted 4 CEOs, 7 restructurings, and countless waves of employees who arrived bright-eyed and left disillusioned. At 63, she moved through the building with the invisibility that came from being essential but unremarkable, the woman who knew where every document lived, who remembered which board member preferred coffee black and which one took cream, who could reconstruct meeting notes from memory when recordings failed. She found Elijah in the basement on Thursday night, 2 nights after he'd fixed Kate's lighting system. He was hunched over a photocopier that had jammed for the 5th time that month. The machine was older than some of the junior executives, held together by prayers and replacement parts scavenged from identical models that had died years ago. "You're the new night maintenance." Judith stood in the doorway, arms crossed, studying him with eyes that had cataloged decades of faces and learned to spot the difference between competence and performance. Elijah looked up, wiping toner dust from his hands. "Yes, ma'am. Elijah Carver. I know who you are. I also know you fixed Kate Whitmore's lighting problem in under 40 minutes when our contracted electricians couldn't solve it in 4 visits. Word travels fast. In buildings, secrets don't exist. Only things people haven't noticed yet." She stepped closer, lowering her voice despite the empty hallway. "You're good at your job. Better than the last 3 people who held it." "Thank you. That's not a compliment. That's an observation. And observations lead to questions." Judith glanced toward the stairs, confirming they were alone. "Why would someone with your skills accept a maintenance position at $22 an hour? Because I have an 8-year-old daughter who needs braces and a life that doesn't leave room for being picky about employment." Judith studied him for another moment, then seemed to arrive at some internal decision. "Follow me." She led him deeper into the basement, past the mechanical rooms and storage areas he'd already mapped to a section marked archives. The door required a keycard Judith produced from her pocket, and beyond it lay rows of filing cabinets that predated the digital revolution. Dust motes swirled in the fluorescent light, and the air tasted like old paper and forgotten bureaucracy. "These are personnel files." Judith pulled open a drawer labeled 2018-2019. "Official records get digitized and sent to HR, but I keep paper copies of everything that seems irregular." She withdrew a folder and handed it to Elijah. Inside were termination documents for a man named Marcus Chen, employee number, hire date, performance reviews that consistently rated him as exceeds expectations, and then a sudden termination notice citing performance issues and cultural misalignment. Elijah flipped through the pages. "His reviews are excellent. Why was he fired?" "That's what I asked myself. So I started keeping copies whenever someone got terminated for reasons that didn't match their documented performance." She pulled another drawer. "This is 2019-2020. The drawer contained 17 files. Elijah opened 3 at random. Angela Martinez, software engineer. 12 months of outstanding reviews, promoted twice, then terminated for being too aggressive in meetings. Jamal Foster, network administrator. 18 months exemplary work, fired for not being a cultural fit. Sarah Kim, data analyst. 9 months of exceeding targets, terminated for unclear communication despite emails showing crystalline clarity. Every single one of these people is a person of color." Judith nodded. "Every single one was hired during periods when the company needed to meet diversity targets for federal contracts. And every single one was terminated by the same person." She pulled out another file, this one thicker than the others. Derek Hollis's signature appeared on every termination notice, countersigned by George Pemberton as board oversight and Samuel Crane as executive approval. "How many files are we talking about?" Judith walked to another filing cabinet, then another, pulling drawers, open to reveal dozens of folders organized by year. 73 people over 6 years. All skilled workers, all people of color, all terminated for reasons that sound legitimate until you examine the pattern. Why keep these? Why not report it to whom? Her laugh was bitter. "Derek reports to the board. George and Samuel are the board. Kate only became CEO 3 years ago, and she inherited a structure designed to protect itself. I'm a secretary. I take notes, I file papers, I make sure the coffee's hot. Nobody listens to secretaries. But you're telling me, because you're not staying quiet either." Judith met his eyes directly. "I saw you taking notes last week. Saw you photographing the shift schedules, documenting the repair requests, tracking who goes where and when. You're looking for something, and I'm betting it connects to this." Elijah closed the file he'd been holding, mind racing through implications. If he got involved, if he started gathering evidence beyond his own observations, He'd be risking the job Zora depended on. But 73 families had already paid that price, and how many more would follow if the pattern continued unchecked? What exactly are you proposing? I give you access to these files. You document everything, the pattern, the evidence, the systematic discrimination. And when you have enough, you take it to someone who can actually do something about it. Federal authorities, journalists, someone beyond Whitmore's control. And what do you get out of this? Judith's expression hardened. I get to retire knowing I didn't spend 32 years being complicit in something that made me sick to witness. That enough? Elijah extended his hand. That's enough. They shook, and in that gesture, a conspiracy was born not of revenge or profit, but of documentation. Judith would continue her work as she always had, invisible and essential. Elijah would continue his maintenance rounds. But in the gaps between official duties, they would build a case that couldn't be dismissed or buried. The first week was reconnaissance. Elijah photographed every personnel file Judith had collected using his phone camera to capture pages in sets of 4, storing them in encrypted cloud folders, accessible only through passwords Zora's birthday couldn't crack. He cross-referenced termination dates with product launches, noting that firing spiked whenever Whitmore secured major contracts, as if diversity was performed for procurement and discarded once the ink dried. The second week was pattern analysis. Elijah created spreadsheets tracking demographics, tenure performance ratings, and termination reasons. The data told a story that transcended individual cases. Black employees averaged 14.3 months before termination, while white employees averaged 4.7 years. Latino workers lasted 11.8 months. Asian employees, 13.2 months. Performance reviews showed no correlation. The best performers were just as likely to be fired as mediocre ones, as long as their skin provided sufficient contrast to the executive suite. The third week was expansion. Elijah began tracking current employees, noting who received plum assignments and who got relegated to projects designed to fail. He documented meeting attendance, observing that Derek rarely invited people of color to strategic planning sessions, despite their official job descriptions requiring participation. He recorded casual comments overheard during maintenance work, the kind of coded language that sounded innocuous in isolation, but revealed systemic bias when accumulated. Then Tuesday afternoon of the fourth week, Zora came home crying, and the abstract data became viscerally personal. Elijah had taken the afternoon off, a rarity, but Zora's teacher had requested a parent meeting. He arrived at Maple Elementary at 3, finding his daughter already waiting outside the principal's office, her science fair project clutched against her chest like a shield. "Baby, what happened?" Her volcano demonstration sat between them on the bench, incorporating actual chemical reactions beyond the standard baking soda and vinegar. She'd spent 2 weeks researching building testing. The notebook beside it contained 47 pages of observations, calculations, and diagrams that would have impressed a middle school student, let alone a third grader. "Mrs. Patterson gave me a C-." Zora's voice was small. Compressed by the weight of injustice, she lacked the vocabulary to name. "Why, this project is excellent. She said I couldn't have done it myself. Said you must have helped me, and that's cheating." Elijah picked up the project rubric stapled to Zora's presentation board. The scoring showed full marks for creativity, presentation, and scientific accuracy. But under independence, Mrs. Patterson had written, "Project Too Advanced for student capability. Parental assistance evident." Original grade would be A, reduced to C for academic dishonesty. "Did I help you with this?" Zora's eyes welled. "You helped me buy the supplies, and you drove me to the library to get books. But I did all the research myself. I wrote everything in my notebook. I built the volcano. I tested it 6 times to make sure the reaction worked right. Then we're going to talk to Mrs. Patterson, and she's going to explain why she thinks my daughter is a liar." The meeting lasted 23 minutes. Mrs. Patterson sat across from them in a classroom decorated with alphabet posters and motivational quotes about reaching for stars. The teacher was 50-something white, with the kind of smile that had probably convinced her she was helping when she was actually harming. "Mr. Carver, I understand you're upset, but let's be realistic." Mrs. Patterson clasped her hands on her desk. "Zora is a bright girl, but this level of work is exactly what she's capable of." Elijah opened Zora's notebook, turning pages covered in careful handwriting. These are her notes, her research, her ideas. Children can copy from websites. These aren't copied, and I can prove it. He pulled out his phone, showing dated photos of Zora working on the project over 2 weeks. Here's her first draft of the volcano structure. Here's her testing different chemical ratios. Here's her rewriting her presentation after deciding the first version wasn't clear enough. Mrs. Patterson's smile tightened. I'm sure Zora did some of the work, all of it, and you gave her a C minus because you couldn't imagine a black 8-year-old being capable of advanced scientific thinking. The words landed like a slap. Mrs. Patterson's face flushed. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Carver. It's a serious problem. He pointed to a different project board visible in the classroom, one featuring a nearly identical volcano with fewer detailed notes. That's Emma Richardson's project. You gave her an A+. Want to explain why two similar projects received such different grades? Emma had different presentation elements. Emma's parents are both professors at Northwestern. I'm a maintenance worker. You assumed Emma's intelligence came naturally and Zora's came from me. That's not teaching, Mrs. Patterson. That's bias. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the clock above the whiteboard counting seconds. Finally, Mrs. Patterson reached for her grading book. I'll revise Zora's grade to reflect the quality of work demonstrated. Not good enough. I want a written apology acknowledging that you underestimated her capabilities based on assumptions about her background. And I want her moved to Mrs. Rodriguez's class because I don't trust you to teach her without prejudice going forward. Mrs. Patterson's jaw set. I don't think that's necessary. Then I'll be speaking with Principal Morrison, the school board, and possibly the local news about why Maple Elementary disciplines black students for being too intelligent. The transfer was approved within 48 hours. Zora's grade was changed to A, and Mrs. Patterson provided a written note that managed to apologize without admitting fault, the kind of corporate non-apology that meant nothing but satisfied bureaucratic requirements. But Zora's tears didn't evaporate with the grade change. That night, she sat on Elijah's lap in their small living room, tongue worrying at the gap between her front teeth. Why did Mrs. Patterson think I cheated, Daddy? Because sometimes people have ideas in their heads about what different people can do, and those ideas are wrong. But they hold on to them anyway because admitting they're wrong is scary. Is it because I'm black? The question hung in the air like smoke from a fire he couldn't extinguish. Elijah wanted to lie to protect her from this particular truth for a few more years. But lies compounded into damage, and she deserved honesty even when it hurt. Yeah, baby, that's part of it. Well, that happened a lot more than it should. Less than it used to, but still too much. What should I do when it happens? You do exactly what you did. You show them your work. You prove them wrong with evidence they can't ignore. And if they still don't listen, you find people who will. Like you, like me. And like your mama used to say, we have to be bigger than the sky because some people will always try to make us smaller than we are. Zora leaned against his chest, and he felt her breathing slow as exhaustion from crying finally caught up. He carried her to bed, tucked her in with her favorite blanket, and stood in the doorway watching her sleep. The rage he'd suppressed during the meeting with Mrs. Patterson surfaced now clean and cold. 73 people at Whitmore Technologies. Countless Zoras in classrooms across the country. The pattern wasn't isolated. It was systemic, woven into institutions that claimed neutrality while perpetuating the same tired assumptions about who deserved opportunity and who deserved suspicion. He returned to his laptop and opened the encrypted files. Judith had sent him additional documents that afternoon, internal emails from Derek discussing diversity initiatives with the kind of cynicism that revealed their true purpose. We need the numbers for the federal audit. After that, we can restructure based on actual cultural fit. Cultural fit. The phrase appeared 47 times across the documents, always in reference to terminating someone whose primary cultural misalignment was existing while not white. Performance issues showed up 32 times despite performance reviews that contradicted the assessment. Doesn't understand our way of doing things appeared 19 times, a subjective measurement that meant everything and nothing. Elijah spent 4 hours that night building a database that connected terminations to contract cycles, showing how diversity hiring surged before government audits and purges followed within months of securing contracts. The pattern was so blatant it suggested either incredible arrogance or absolute confidence that nobody would look closely enough to notice. Friday night, the server attack happened just before midnight. Elijah was replacing a ballast on the 7th floor when his radio crackled with urgency. All maintenance to the IT floor. System emergency. The voice was Derek, stripped of its usual condescension by genuine panic. He took the stairs 2 at a time, arriving on 9 to find chaos. Monitors displayed error messages in cascading red, and the network operations center had devolved into shouting matches between technicians who couldn't agree on diagnosis or solution. Derek stood at the center, face pale, barking orders that contradicted each other. DDoS attack. Someone's flooding our servers with traffic. We can't isolate the source, can't block the range, can't do anything except watch the whole system crash. Elijah stood in the doorway, technically present, but clearly not needed. Then one of the junior techs spotted him. "Hey, maintenance guy, you know anything about networks?" "Some. I studied network security in college." Derek spun around. "You studied what, 2 semesters of network architecture and security protocols?" "Didn't finish the degree, but I remember the concepts." Desperation overrode Derek's instinct to dismiss. "Can you help or not?" "Probably. Let me see the traffic logs." They made space at a terminal, and Elijah scanned the data streaming across the screen. The attack was sophisticated but followed predictable patterns. Flood the server with requests from distributed sources, overwhelm the processing capacity, force a shutdown. Except the attackers had made one mistake. They'd routed through a single proxy network, which meant all the traffic shared a common signature. He opened a command terminal, fingers moving through Python syntax he hadn't written in years, but hadn't forgotten. The script took 14 minutes to write, another 3 to debug, and when he executed it, the effect was immediate. Traffic from the proxy network got redirected to a null route. Legitimate requests resumed processing, and the servers began recovering from near collapse. The room fell silent except for the hum of cooling fans and the click of keyboards resuming normal work. Derek stared at the screen showing normal operations restored. "What did you do?" "Identified the common signature in the attack traffic and filtered it out. The attackers were using a proxy network based in Eastern Europe, but they routed everything through a single node. Block that node and the attack collapses. You wrote that script in under 20 minutes, 17, actually. The concepts aren't complicated if you understand how DOS attacks work. They rely on volume and distribution, but volume requires coordination, and coordination creates patterns." Derek's expression shifted from relief to something harder to read. "Where exactly did you study network security community college?" "Cleveland Tech, 2 years before I had to leave." "And you've been working as an electrician since then?" "Electrical work pays the bills. Network security requires degrees I don't have, and interviews I won't pass." The subtext landed. Derek understood perfectly why a black man with incomplete education couldn't break into tech sectors that claimed to value diversity while hiring from the same homogeneous pools. His face showed a flicker of something that might have been guilt before corporate armor reasserted itself. "Well, we appreciate the help. You can return to your regular duties." Elijah closed the terminal and left without waiting for dismissal. In the stairwell, hands trembling from adrenaline and suppressed anger, he allowed himself 30 seconds to feel the victory. He'd solved a problem Derek's entire department couldn't crack. He'd demonstrated capabilities that exceeded most of the people who earned triple his salary. And he'd done it in 17 minutes while wearing a maintenance uniform that rendered him invisible until crisis demanded otherwise. His shift ended at 6 a.m. Saturday. He went home, slept 4 hours, then received a text from an unknown number at 11. "Impressive work last night. I'd like to discuss something. Can you come in Monday at 6 p.m. before your shift?" Monday at 6, Elijah arrived to find Kate in her office, the city sunset painting the windows gold. She gestured to a chair across from her desk. "You saved our entire infrastructure Friday night. Derek told me what happened. I just wrote a script. Nothing complicated. Nothing complicated for someone who understands network architecture at a level that requires years of study and practice." Her eyes were sharp. "Why are you working maintenance when you clearly have skills that qualify you for engineering positions?" "Because engineering positions require completed degrees and the kind of interview performance that assumes I belong there. Maintenance just requires showing up and fixing things. That's the system failing you. That's the system working exactly as designed." He kept his voice neutral. "I'm not complaining. I needed a job. You gave me one. But let's not pretend the barriers don't exist. What if I could remove some of those barriers?" Kate leaned forward. "I need someone I can trust. Someone who sees problems others miss and solves them without ego or politics. Someone who's been underestimated their entire career and turned that invisibility into a superpower." "What are you offering?" "Nothing yet. But I'm asking, are you interested in something beyond maintenance?" Elijah thought about Judah's files, about the investigation he'd barely begun, about whether accepting advancement from Kate would compromise his ability to expose what Derek and the board had done. "Can I think about it?" "Of course. But Elijah, whatever you're looking into, and I know you're looking into something, I want you to know I'm on your side." He left without committing, but the offer sat in his mind like an unresolved chord. Tuesday night, he told Judith about the conversation. "She knows something's happening." Judith's face was grave. "And Derek's been asking questions about you specifically. How much time you spend down here? Whether I've been giving you access to files? What did you tell him, that you're thorough and I appreciate not having to explain where things are repeatedly. She pulled another file from a locked drawer, but he's not stupid. He knows something's happening, even if he doesn't know what yet. The file contains surveillance logs. Derek had been tracking keycard access throughout the building, looking for patterns that suggested unauthorized activity. Elijah's name appeared 17 times in the past month, all legitimate maintenance calls, but highlighted as if proximity to executive floors indicated guilt. He's building a case to fire you. Then we need to move faster. How much more documentation do we need? Judith considered. Financial evidence would help. Proof that Derek or the board members benefited materially from the scheme beyond just protecting their positions. How do I get financial records? You don't. But I know someone who might help. She made a call speaking in careful code. 15 minutes later, Elijah sat in a coffee shop 3 blocks from Whitmore, across from a woman named Rachel Torres. Private investigator, late 40s, sharp eyes that missed nothing. She listened to his summary, making notes in a leather journal. You're describing civil rights violations at minimum, possibly racketeering, if we can prove financial benefit. But comprehensive forensics costs $30,000. Minimum. Elijah's savings contains $762. I can't afford that. Rachel closed her journal. Then you need federal backing. FBI has a corporate fraud division. They love cases with clear documentation. Walk into a federal building, ask for white-collar crime, show them what you have. That Wednesday morning before sleeping, Elijah drafted a letter to the FBI. 4 hours of writing, attaching document summaries, explaining patterns without editorializing. Just facts, dates, names, demographics, terminations. He mailed it Thursday from a different neighborhood paying cash. Then went home wondering if he'd accelerated his own termination or started something that might matter. Friday at 6 p.m., just as Elijah was preparing for his shift, Derek called him to HR. The manager, Patricia, gestured to a chair with a smile that preceded bad news. Mr. Carver, we've received reports that you accessed computer systems without authorization last Friday. I helped resolve a network emergency at Derek Hollis's request. Multiple witnesses. Patricia consulted a file. Mr. Hollis indicates that while your assistance was initially appreciated, subsequent investigation revealed you exceeded appropriate intervention scope. I wrote a script to block malicious traffic. That's all. You accessed systems containing proprietary code and potentially sensitive data. As a maintenance worker, you lack security clearance for that level of system access. Derek asked me to help. I helped. If that violated policy, Derek violated it by asking. Patricia's smile never wavered. Be that as it may, we're terminating your employment effective immediately. You'll receive 2 weeks severance and 30 days benefits. Continuation. The walk to the basement was humiliating by design. Employees who'd never acknowledged his existence suddenly found him fascinating. He cleaned out his locker, spare clothes, the notebook where observations were already backed up in encrypted cloud storage. At the entrance, security handed him his belongings in a cardboard box. The automatic doors closed behind him, and Elijah stood on Michigan Avenue, holding his work life, knowing Derek had won this round, but underestimating the cost of that victory. His phone rang that night at 9:14. Unknown number. Mr. Carver. This is Special Agent Lucas Thorne, FBI. I received your letter. We need to talk. The FBI field office occupied 3 floors of a federal building on West Roosevelt Road, concrete and glass designed to project authority without beauty. Special Agent Lucas Thorne met Elijah in a conference room that smelled like stale coffee and the accumulated tension of 1,000 interrogations. He was 47, black, with gray threading through his close-cropped hair and eyes that had seen enough corporate malfeasance to no longer be surprised by human creativity in pursuit of profit. Your documentation is thorough. Thorne spread printouts across the table, copies of the files Elijah had sent annotated with sticky notes and highlighter marks. 73 terminations, clear demographic pattern, coordination between multiple executives. This is civil rights violation territory, at minimum possibly RICO, if we can prove financial benefit beyond salary protection. Can you prove it? That depends on what else exists. Paper trails, email communications, financial transfers. You've given us the skeleton. We need the organs and circulatory system. I don't have access anymore. Derek made sure of that when he fired me. Derek Hollis made a mistake firing you. Thorne's smile was thin. Retaliation against a whistleblower is a federal crime. The termination itself becomes evidence. I didn't blow any whistles. I sent you a letter. You reported suspected civil rights violations to federal authorities. That's textbook whistleblowing. And your termination 2 days later, citing computer access violations that occurred at your supervisor's request, that's textbook retaliation. Elijah absorbed this, recognizing the shift from victim to protected witness. So what happens now? Now we investigate. But I'm going to be honest with you. Carver, investigations take time. Months, possibly years. We need to subpoena records, interview witnesses, build a case that survives corporate lawyers who get paid more in a week than you make in a year. Can you afford to wait that long? The question landed heavy. Elijah's severance pay would cover 2 weeks of expenses. After that, his savings would evaporate within a month. Zora's braces still needed paying rent, still needed meeting, and electrical work was competitive enough that disappearing for months would mean losing clients to more reliable contractors. I'll manage. Will you? Thorne's tone wasn't unkind, just realistic. Because if you can't, if you take another job and move on, that's fine. We'll still investigate. But cases like this are stronger when the victim participates actively. Testimony documentation, willingness to go public when the time comes. What are you asking? I'm asking if you're all in. Because once we start, Whitmore's lawyers will come after you. They'll claim you're a disgruntled employee making false accusations. They'll dig into your past looking for anything to discredit you. They'll make your life hell to discourage others from speaking up. Elijah thought about Zora asking why Mrs. Patterson assumed she cheated. Thought about 73 families who'd already lost jobs and dignity. Thought about the maintenance workers and secretaries and contractors who'd spend careers invisible unless crisis demanded their competence. I'm all in, but I need to protect my daughter. We can arrange that. Thorne made a note. FBI victim assistance can provide resources if you face direct threats. But understand, protection doesn't mean isolation. Your daughter will see some of this. She'll ask questions, then I'll answer them. Because the alternative is teaching her that staying quiet is safer than standing up, and I won't do that. Good. Thorne gathered the papers into organized stacks. I'm assigning 2 other agents to this case. We'll start with subpoenas for Whitmore's personnel records and financial statements. I'll also want to interview your secretary contact Judith Brennan. Can you arrange that? She's risked enough already, and she'll risk more if she's willing to testify. But I won't compel her without consent. Just ask. Elijah left the federal building with a business card bearing Thorne's direct number, in a sense that he'd crossed a threshold that eliminated retreat as an option. The afternoon sun felt too bright after the fluorescent cave of the conference room and the city noise traffic construction. Humanity compressed into concrete corridors seemed amplified beyond tolerance. His phone showed 3 missed calls from Kate Whitmore. He'd ignored her request to meet after saving the servers, too focused on documentation and survival. But avoidance couldn't continue indefinitely, and she deserved to know what was coming. He called from a bench near the federal building, watching pigeons fight over discarded French fries while the phone rang. Elijah, where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for days. I was fired. Derek claimed I violated computer access policies. That's absurd. You saved our entire system from collapse. Apparently saving it required accessing code I wasn't authorized to see. He cited policy sections, HR agreed, and I'm out. Silence stretched across the connection. Then Kate's voice returned harder than he'd heard before. When did this happen? Friday evening. 6 p.m. right before my shift would have started. I wasn't informed. The CEO of the company and my IT director fires someone without my knowledge or approval. He has board backing. George Pemberton and Samuel Crane both signed off on it. Of course they did. Another pause. Are you planning legal action? Something like that. Meaning I've been documenting things beyond my termination. Things that pattern across years and involve people beyond Derek. And I've shared that documentation with federal authorities who are now investigating. He heard her breath catch. What kind of things? Systematic racial discrimination. 73 terminations over 6 years, all people of color, all skilled workers fired for pretextual reasons, while the company maintained federal diversity requirements on paper. Jesus, Kate's voice dropped. How long have you known? About a month. I was gathering evidence before going public. And you didn't think to tell me. With respect, Ms. Whitmore, I didn't know whose side you were on. Your father started the surveillance system Derek weaponized. Your board members enabled it. How was I supposed to know you weren't complicit? You could have trusted me. Trust gets built through actions, not titles. You've been kind to me personally, but kindness doesn't equal alignment on systemic issues. Fair. Her tone shifted. Businesswoman replacing offended CEO. What do you need from me? Testimony when the time comes. Access to any records the FBI requests. And probably your willingness to acknowledge that Whitmore Technologies has been violating civil rights law for the better part of a decade. That will destroy the company. Maybe. Or maybe it'll force the kind of reform that should have happened years ago. My father built this company. Your father also built a system that's harmed 73 families and counting. You can honor his good work by dismantling his bad work. Kate was quiet for long enough that Elijah thought the call had dropped. Then she spoke and her voice carried the weight of decisions that would define the rest of her professional life. Tell your FBI contact I'll cooperate fully. Whatever they need, they get. And Elijah, I'm sorry. For not seeing it sooner, for not questioning why our diversity numbers look good on paper, but our halls stayed homogeneous. I should have known. Most people don't want to know. That's how systems like this survive. Well, now I know. And I'm going to help tear it down even if it means tearing down everything my family built. Elijah ended the call and sat watching the city move around him. Somewhere in those towers, people were having the same conversation, powerful individuals discovering that the institutions they served had been rotting from foundations they'd never thought to inspect. Some would fight to preserve the rot. Others would join the demolition. The outcome depended on which group accumulated more courage. That night, Zora asked why he wasn't going to work. They sat at the kitchen table with spaghetti and frozen meatballs. The meal stretched to cover 2 nights because groceries had become a calculation of necessity versus want. Zora had sensed something was wrong since he picked her up from school, her gap-toothed smile tentative, her questions careful. I was let go from Whitmore, baby. They said I violated some policies. I did what they asked me to do, but sometimes doing the right thing gets counted as breaking rules depending on who's deciding. That's not fair. No, it's not. But fairness and rules don't always overlap. Zora twirled spaghetti around her fork thinking, are we going to be okay? We're going to be fine. I've got some electrical jobs lined up, and I'm working on something that might lead to better opportunities. What kind of something? I'm helping some people understand that a company was treating workers badly. And when we finish helping, things might get better for a lot of families, including us. Maybe, but that's not why I'm doing it. Why are you doing it? Elijah reached across the table and touched the gap between her front teeth. The space braces would soon close. Because 73 families went through what we're going through. Lost jobs, lost stability, all because someone decided they didn't belong. And if I can help make sure that doesn't happen to 74, 75, 100 more families, then whatever we sacrifice is worth it, even if we can't afford my braces right away. The question gutted him. He'd been so focused on systemic justice that he'd momentarily forgotten the immediate costs, the orthodontic work that would help Zora's teeth align properly, prevent future problems, give her one less thing to be self-conscious about in a world that already gave her too many. We'll find a way, maybe not immediately, but we'll get there. Zora nodded, accepting this with the resilience children develop when they learn early that life requires flexibility. She finished her spaghetti, helped wash dishes, then retreated to her room for homework, while Elijah sat alone with the calculator of their finances. Severance $1,400, savings $762, upcoming rent $800, utilities approximately $150, groceries $200 if he stretched, Zora's after-school care $120 per week. That left roughly $900 before he needed another paycheck, which meant he had maybe 2 weeks to line up enough electrical work to bridge the gap. His phone buzzed with a text from Judith. Derek's been asking about you. Wanted to know if you took any files. I played dumb, but he's paranoid. Be careful. Elijah responded, FBI wants to interview you. No pressure, but your testimony would help. Think about it. 3 dots appeared, pulsed, vanished. Then I've been thinking about it for 6 years. Tell me when and where. The interview happened Friday morning at the Federal Building. Judith arrived in a wool coat that had seen better decades, carrying a leather bag that smelled like the archives where she'd spent 3 decades preserving records everyone else wanted forgotten. Thorne sat her down with coffee and gentleness, recognizing immediately that she was the keystone witness, the person who'd watched the machinery of discrimination operate and documented it when no one else cared. Mrs. Brennan, walked me through how you started keeping these files. Judith wrapped her hands around the coffee mug, anchoring herself. 2018. We'd just hired Marcus Chin, a brilliant software engineer out of Carnegie Mellon. 6 months later, Derek fired him for not being a cultural fit. I was in the meeting. Marcus spoke perfect English, had better technical skills than anyone on his team, got along with everybody. But Derek decided he didn't fit, and that was that. Did Derek explain what he meant by cultural fit? No. That's what made it useful. Cultural fit can mean anything. Too quiet, too loud, too different, too same. It's a reason that isn't a reason, and you can't argue with it because it's subjective. What happened after Marcus was fired, I started paying attention. Notice that over the next 6 months, 3 more people of color got terminated for similarly vague reasons. All of them had excellent performance reviews. All of them were replaced by white employees with comparable or lesser qualifications, and you began keeping copies of their files. I began keeping copies of everything. Termination notices, performance reviews, hiring records, emails when I could access them. I'm a secretary. People forget I exist until they need something filed. That invisibility became useful. Thorne made notes occasionally asking for clarification on dates or names. Elijah sat in the corner, watching Judith transform from retiring secretary to meticulous archivist, her testimony building a foundation no corporate lawyer could easily dismiss. Did you ever consider reporting this to the EEOC or other authorities every day? But I was scared. I'm 63, no college degree, been a secretary my entire career. Who's going to believe me over board members and executives? Who's going to protect me when Whitmore's lawyers come after my pension? What changed? Elijah showed up, and he wasn't scared. I was terrified. Judith smiled, but you acted anyway. Fear without action is just paralysis. You turned your fear into documentation, investigation, resistance. That's courage. The interview lasted 3 hours. By the end, Thorne had names, dates, specific instances of discriminatory language, and Judith's willingness to testify under oath if the case proceeded to trial. He thanked her promised FBI protection if she faced retaliation, and watched her leave with the posture of someone who just set down a weight she'd carried for years. She's credible. Thorne turned to Elijah. Jury will believe her, which means we have our foundation witness. Now we need the financial connections. How do you get those subpoenas and forensic accountants? We'll trace money flow between Whitmore board members and any external entities that benefited from the scheme. If Derek or the others profited beyond salary, if there's a broader conspiracy involving IP theft or corporate espionage, the financial records will show it. How long? 6 months minimum. Maybe a year. I don't have a year. Then find a way to survive 6 months. Because this case is happening with or without your active participation, but it's stronger with you visible and engaged. Elijah spent the weekend sending resumes to electrical contractors following up on leads that mostly ended in polite rejection or silence. The black unemployment rate ran twice the white rate for reasons that required no conspiracy theories. Just the accumulated effect of hiring managers who trusted people who looked like them, interviewed candidates who shared their backgrounds, and promoted workers who fit cultural norms defined by homogeneity. Monday brought an unexpected call from Kate Whitmore. I'm creating a new position, Chief Ethics Officer. Salary $195,000, full benefits, reporting directly to me rather than through any board oversight. I want you to take it. Elijah sat in his living room, phone pressed to his ear, wondering if he'd heard correctly. You want to hire me? After I reported your company to the FBI, I want to hire you because you reported my company to the FBI, because you documented what everyone else ignored, because you risked everything when risking nothing would have been easier. I'm not qualified for an executive position. You're more qualified than most of my current executives, and qualification is a construct designed to exclude people who don't fit predetermined molds. I need someone who will burn those molds down. What would the job actually involve? Oversight of hiring practices, review of terminations, investigation of discrimination complaints, regular audits of demographic representation across all levels. Essentially, you'd be the internal check against the kind of systemic bias that's been operating unchecked. Derek and the board members will fight this. Derek's gone. I've fired him this morning. George and Samuel are suspended pending the FBI investigation. The board members who are left understand that reform isn't optional. Elijah processed this, recognizing the risk Kate was taking. Hiring him publicly aligned her with the investigation, rather than against it, making her company's cooperation explicit and eliminating any pretense of neutrality. If I take this, people will say, you're trying to buy my silence. Let them. Your testimony is already with the FBI. Employment doesn't change what you've documented or what you're willing to say under oath. And if the investigation drags out, if public opinion turns against Whitmore, then we endure it. Truth doesn't become less true because it's inconvenient. He thought about Zora's braces, about rent and groceries and stability, about the 73 families who hadn't been offered second chances, about whether accepting help from the institution he was helping dismantle constituted compromise or strategy. I need to think about it. Take the time you need. But Elijah, this isn't charity, it's investment. I'm betting that the person who cared enough to document injustice when no one was watching will care enough to prevent it when everyone's watching. Tuesday, he discussed the offer with Zora over breakfast. A lady wants to give Daddy a new job. Really good job, lots of money helping make sure companies treat people fairly. Zora spread peanut butter on toast with careful precision. Is it the company that fired you? Yes. Why would they hire you back? Because I told the truth about them treating people badly. And the new boss wants to fix it. That's weird. Yeah, it is. Are you going to take it? I don't know yet. What do you think I should do? Zora considered, gap-toothed smile appearing around a bite of toast. Mama used to say you should always do the thing that helps the most people. Even if it's hard. Smart woman, your mama. So what helps the most people? The question crystallized his decision. Refusing the job preserved some abstract purity of motive, but it didn't feed his daughter or position him to prevent future harm. Accepting it created conflicts and complications, but it also gave him institutional power to implement the reforms his documentation demanded. Taking the job helps more people. So I'll take it. He called Kate that afternoon and accepted. The employment contract arrived via email within 2 hours, 15 pages of legal language that his freelance electrical clients had never required. He signed anyway, knowing that contracts protected both parties, or neither, depending on who could afford better lawyers. The announcement went public Thursday morning. Whitmore Technologies issued a press release declaring the creation of a chief ethics officer position and Elijah Carver's appointment to the role. The response was immediate and polarized. Business publications praised Whitmore's proactive approach to corporate governance. Civil rights organizations expressed cautious optimism. Conservative commentators questioned whether a maintenance worker was qualified for executive leadership. Online forums debated whether Elijah was a hero or a grifter, a whistleblower, or an opportunist. Derek Hollis posted a statement through his lawyer, Mr. Carver's termination was based on legitimate policy violations, and his subsequent accusations represent an attempt to weaponize federal agencies against his former employer. The truth will emerge through proper legal channels. George Pemberton's lawyer issued a similar denial wrapped in language about decades of service and commitment to ethical business practices that rang hollow against the documentation FBI forensic accountants were currently dissecting. Elijah ignored most of it, focusing instead on the practical work of his new position. His first week involved reading every personnel policy Whitmore had accumulated over 40 years, identifying sections that enabled discrimination through vague language or subjective criteria. Cultural fit disappeared from the lexicon entirely. Performance evaluations acquired specific measurable standards. Termination procedures required documentation and review by multiple parties rather than a single supervisor's discretion. His second week brought interviews with current employees, a listening tour designed to identify ongoing issues rather than assume the problem ended with Derek's firing. 17 people requested private meetings. 12 described experiences of casual racism, comments about articulate Black colleagues, assumptions about Latino workers' immigration status. Surprise when Asian engineers demonstrated leadership rather than technical skills. The patterns emerged clearly. Discrimination had metastasized beyond firings into daily microaggressions, structural barriers to promotion, and toxic cultures that talented people endured until they found better options elsewhere. Elijah documented everything, creating a report that Kate read with visible distress. I had no idea it was this pervasive. You weren't looking. Most people in power don't look unless crisis forces their attention. What do we do about it? Fire the managers who created these environments. Institute mandatory bias training for everyone with hiring or supervisory authority. Create anonymous reporting mechanisms so people can surface issues without career risk. And most importantly, measure outcomes rather than intentions. That last part is crucial. Elijah leaned forward, intensity sharpening his voice. Companies love to talk about valuing diversity, but if your leadership is 92% white and 87% male, your values are aspirational at best. Measure the demographics at every level. Track promotion rates by race and gender. Audit salary disparities. Make this data public so there's accountability. That will make us look terrible. You look terrible because you are terrible. Transparency doesn't create the problem, it just makes hiding it impossible. Kate absorbed this without flinching. All right, full transparency, measurable outcomes, structural reform. What timeline are we looking at? 2 years minimum for meaningful change. 5 years before it's embedded enough to survive leadership transitions. And what do I tell shareholders who want immediate results? Tell them that performative diversity is cheap and easy. Real equity is expensive and hard. If they want the first, hire a PR firm. If they want the second, give me the authority and resources to build it properly. She authorized it. Within a month, Elijah had a team of 4 reporting to him, HR professionals who understood that compliance wasn't the same as justice, data analysts who could identify statistical patterns of bias, and a lawyer specializing in employment discrimination who could navigate the legal complexities of reform. The FBI investigation proceeded in parallel, slower but inexorable. Thorne called every few weeks with updates, subpoenas, issued, records analyzed, witnesses interviewed. Financial forensics had traced payments from offshore accounts to Derek's personal holdings transactions that corresponded with successful product launches at companies competing with Whitmore. The picture emerging was uglier than simple discrimination. Derek had been systematically firing talented engineers, stealing their work, and selling it to competitors through intermediary companies that obscured the connections. The terminations served dual purposes, eliminating diverse talent while covering the theft by removing the people who could testify about what they'd created. George Pemberton and Samuel Crane had enabled this by providing board-level protection and sharing in the profits. Over 6 years, the conspiracy had generated approximately $11 million in illegal revenue, split between the 3 men and several external partners. We're looking at wire fraud, mail fraud, theft of trade secrets, conspiracy to violate civil rights, and RICO charges. Thorne's voice carried satisfaction. This isn't a discrimination case anymore. This is organized crime. When do arrests happen? Soon. We're coordinating with prosecutors to ensure charges stick. But I wanted you to know first you're going to be called as a witness. Grand jury initially, possibly trial if it goes that far. I'll be there, I know you will. And Mr. Carver, thank you. Cases like this don't happen without people like you willing to risk everything. Elijah hung up and sat in his new office corner location windows, overlooking Chicago furniture that cost more than his previous annual salary. Zora's school photo occupied the desk next to his computer, gap-toothed smile, reminding him why any of this mattered. His phone showed a text from Judith: arrested Derek this morning. News says George and Samuel too. We did it. Not yet, Elijah typed back. Arrests are just the beginning. Trials, appeals, actual consequences, that's when we'll know if justice means anything. But tonight he allowed himself to feel the weight lift fractionally. 73 families would see their terminations recognized as illegal rather than merely unfortunate. Talented workers who'd been told they didn't fit would have documentation proving the problem wasn't their capabilities, but their employer's biases. And somewhere a child like Zora would apply for a job in a few years and encounter systems that measured merit rather than melanin potential, rather than pedigree. That night, Zora asked about the news coverage. They were showing pictures of Derek Hollis on TV. The reporter said he stole things and hurt families. Is that the man who fired you? That's him. Are you happy he got arrested? Elijah considered how to answer honestly without teaching vindictiveness. I'm glad he's facing consequences for his actions. But I'm not happy about what he did. Those 73 families still lost years they can't get back. Arresting Derek doesn't undo that harm. But it stops him from hurting more people, right? That's the idea. Justice can't erase the past, but it can try to prevent the same harm from continuing into the future. Zora nodded, processing. Daddy, when you were documenting all those things, were you scared? Terrified. But you did it anyway. Because being scared and doing nothing would have meant 73 became 100. 100 became 200. Sometimes the only way to stop being scared is to act despite the fear. Bigger than the skate, bigger than the sky, baby. She hugged him, small arms wrapping around his chest, and Elijah held her while the city lights flickered through his office windows. Tomorrow would bring more work policies to implement, employees to interview resistance from people invested in maintaining systems that serve them well. But tonight he let himself exist in the knowledge that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was the decision that some things mattered more than safety, that silence cost more than speaking, that the world only changed when people refused to accept the way things had always been. His phone buzzed with another message, this one from Kate Grand. Jury convenes next month. We're scheduled to testify. Are you ready? Elijah typed a response, then deleted it and called instead. Ready as I'll ever be. What about you? Hattie's laugh was tired but genuine. I keep thinking about what you said, that I could honor my father's good work by dismantling his bad work. Turns out there was more bad work than I realized. Most legacies are mixed. What matters is which parts you choose to continue. I choose the part where we actually mean it when we say everyone deserves opportunity, even if that means admitting we've been failing at it for decades. Then we're aligned. See you in court. The grand jury indictment came 6 weeks later, charging Derek Hollis with 17 federal crimes and recommending trial on all counts. George Pemberton faced 14 charges, Samuel Crane 12. Victor Ashford, the external partner who'd received and resold stolen intellectual property, was arrested in the Cayman Islands and awaiting extradition. The trial date was set for 14 months, out enough time for lawyers to prepare arguments that would determine whether systematic discrimination qualified as criminal conspiracy or merely regrettable corporate culture. Elijah used those 14 months to rebuild Whitmore from the inside. Hiring practices were overhauled to include diverse interview panels and blind resume reviews. Promotion criteria became transparent and measurable. Salary audits revealed gender and racial pay gaps that got corrected with retroactive compensation. Anonymous reporting channels surfaced dozens of additional complaints that led to disciplinary actions ranging from mandatory training to termination. And slowly the demographics shifted. Not overnight. Systemic change never happened that quickly, but quarter by quarter the percentages moved. Leadership became 18% people of color, then 23, then 29. Women occupied decision-making roles in proportions that approached parity. The company's products improved as diverse perspectives shaped design and development. Revenue increased. Employee satisfaction surveys showed rising scores. Talent retention improved as people stopped leaving for environments that valued them more. Turns out justice and business success weren't mutually exclusive after all. They just required leadership willing to prioritize both instead of assuming they couldn't coexist. The trial began on a Tuesday in federal court downtown Chicago, with media coverage that framed the case as a referendum on corporate America's diversity failures. Elijah took the stand on day 3, sworn in with his hand on a Bible Zora had helped him choose that morning. The prosecutor was a woman named Jennifer Martinez, 40-something, and sharp as surgical steel. She walked Elijah through his documentation, methodically, dates, names, termination reasons, the statistical impossibility of 73 coincidental firings, all affecting people of color. Mr. Carver, in your professional opinion, was there a pattern of racial discrimination at Whitmore Technologies? Objection. The defense attorney stood, expensive suit hanging perfectly on a frame that suggested personal trainers and careful nutrition. Mr. Carver is a maintenance worker turned ethics officer. He's not qualified to offer expert opinions on discrimination. Judge Morrison, a black woman in her 60s who'd spent 30 years watching corporate defendants try these tactics, barely glanced up. Overruled. Mr. Carver has personal experience with the practices in question and has conducted extensive documentation. He's qualified to testify about what he observed. Martinez smiled. I'll rephrase. Mr. Carver, based on your 6 months of observation and documentation, did you observe a pattern? Yes. People of color were systematically terminated for pretextual reasons, while white employees with comparable or inferior performance remained employed. The pattern was clear, consistent, and correlated with federal contract cycles that required diversity compliance. The testimony continued for 4 hours. Cross-examination attempted to portray Elijah as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge through false accusations. But the documentation was too thorough, the pattern too clear, the financial evidence of Derek's IP theft too damning. Judith testified next, transforming from nervous secretary to unshakable witness. She described 6 years of watching talented people destroyed for existing while Black, Latino, Asian in spaces that claimed to welcome diversity but punished it through 1,000 small exclusions. Kate testified, last CEO armor stripped away to reveal someone genuinely horrified by what her company had become. She acknowledged her father's role, her own failure to notice, her current commitment to reform that went beyond legal compliance into moral obligation. The jury deliberated for 11 hours across 2 days. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous. Derek Hollis guilty on all 17 counts. Sentencing recommendations included 24 months federal prison plus restitution. George Pemberton, guilty on 12 of 14 charges, 18 months recommended. Samuel Crane, guilty on 9 of 12 charges, 14 months recommended, reduced due to cooperation. The courtroom erupted. Elijah sat quietly watching Derek's face collapse into the realization that consequences existed even for people who'd spent careers evading them. George maintained composure, but his hands trembled. Samuel stared at the table, accepting the verdict like a man who'd known it was coming. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Elijah gave a brief statement, choosing words Zora would be proud of when she watched the news that night. 73 families waited 6 years for acknowledgement that what happened to them was wrong. Today's verdict doesn't undo that harm, but it establishes that systematic discrimination has consequences beyond reputation damage or diversity training. It establishes that our civil rights laws mean something. A reporter shouted a question about whether Whitmore would survive the scandal. Whitmore Technologies is fundamentally stronger now than before the investigation. Not because we hid the problem, but because we confronted it. Companies that face their failures honestly have a chance at redemption. Companies that don't just move the same corruption to different departments. Another question about Derek's sentencing. 24 months isn't enough to repair 73 shattered careers, but it's enough to send a message that stealing people's livelihoods carries consequences. That's a start. He declined further questions and walked to where Zora waited with Kate. His daughter had gotten her braces 2 months earlier. The insurance from his new position had covered the full cost. The metal brackets gleamed in the afternoon sun, and she hugged him fiercely. You won, Daddy. We won. All 73 families, everyone who testified, everyone who documented when documentation felt futile. That's what winning looks like, collective effort producing systemic change. Bigger than the sky, bigger than the sky. 18 months later, Elijah stood in a different kind of courthouse, not federal criminal, but civil settlement. The mediation had taken 7 months, but finally Whitmore Technologies had agreed to terms. $9.4 million distributed among the 73 families who'd been wrongfully terminated. The amounts varied based on lost wages, duration of unemployment, and documented harm, but every family received something. Marcus Chen stood in the hallway outside the courtroom, older than his personnel photo, but unmistakable. He saw Elijah and extended his hand. Thank you, my daughter's back in college. Full ride, but she couldn't have applied without stability. Your documentation made that possible. Elijah shook his hand. You did the work that got you hired. Derek stealing it doesn't change what you created. Still, without you, we'd all just be footnotes in corporate efficiency reports. Now we're precedent. The settlement hearing lasted 40 minutes. Judge Morrison, the same judge who'd presided over the criminal trial, approved the terms with a statement that would be quoted in employment law textbooks for decades. Let this case stand as notice to corporate America: discrimination is not a cost of doing business. It is a crime with consequences, financial, reputational, and criminal. The employees of Whitmore Technologies who lost their livelihoods deserve not just compensation but acknowledgement that the system failed them. Today we provide both. Outside, Elijah found Kate talking with journalists. She'd aged in the past 2 years, lines around her eyes that hadn't been there, silver threads appearing in her dark hair. But there was something lighter in her bearing, as if truth had weight and she'd finally set it down. We're also announcing the Carver Whitmore Opportunity Fund. She gestured to a banner behind her. $12 million in endowment focused on scholarships and career support for children of the 73 families and for anyone who's faced similar discrimination elsewhere. A reporter asked why she'd contribute personal money to the fund. Because my father built systems that harm people. I can't change what he did, but I can ensure that the next generation has opportunities he tried to deny their parents. Kate glanced at Elijah. Mr. Carver will serve as executive director. He's the only person I trust to ensure the fund actually serves the communities it's meant to help. That evening, Elijah took Zora to Navy Pier. They'd been here once before when Naomi was still alive, when the world felt manageable and predictable. Now at 10 years old, Zora had lost her gap-toothed smile to orthodontics, but gained something more valuable, a sense that her father's work meant something beyond paychecks and titles. They stood at the end of the pier watching boats cut through Lake Michigan while the city glowed behind them. Daddy, Mrs. Rodriguez said I should write about you for my social studies project, about how you changed things. You should write about the 73 families, and about Judith who kept records when no one else cared, and about your mama who taught me that doing the right thing matters more than doing the easy thing. But you're the one everyone talks about, because I'm visible. But change doesn't happen because one person stands up. It happens because enough people decide that the way things are isn't the way things have to be. Zora leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. Is it fixed now, the company? It's better. Not fixed. Systems don't fix overnight. But we changed our corner of the world. Made it a little more honest, a little more just. Sometimes that's all you can do. Bigger than the sky, Elijah smiled, looking out at the water where city lights reflected like stars that had fallen to earth. Bigger than the sky, sweetheart. Always bigger than the sky. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of lake water and distant rain. Behind them, Chicago hummed with its endless motion, people going to work, coming home, building lives in the spaces between skyscrapers and hope. And somewhere in that city, other Elijahs were documenting, other Judithas were preserving records, other Zoras were learning that their voices mattered. The fight wasn't over. It never really ended. But tonight, standing at the edge of the water with his daughter beside him and 73 families a little closer to whole, Elijah Carver allowed himself to believe that the arc of the moral universe, however long, was bending towards something that resembled justice. And that was enough.